The Assistant Democratic Leader.
Mr. President, while the Republican whip is still on the floor, I believe there is an agreement at 10:45 that the Republicans will have control of the floor. I have waited patiently while the senator from Texas has given his speech, and I wonder if he would allow me 10 minutes on the floor to speak before the Republicans claim their time.
Absolutely.
I make
Is there objection?
unanimous consent.
Without objection.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, why are we facing a continuing resolution to fund the government of the United States of America? Because our budget expires on October 1st. It's a new budget. And so we're supposed to pass spending bills, appropriation bills, budget bills that will cover this next fiscal year, 12 months of it, and we have failed. The Senate Appropriations Committee, which I'm proud to serve on, has done its job on a bipartisan basis. In fact, we've reported out all 12 spending bills, but had very little luck on the floor of the United States Senate moving those bills forward. The first one we took up was the military construction bill, which passed with good bipartisan support, was sent over to the House of Representatives, and they loaded it up with every political issue they could think of for this campaign season. And that bill started floundering at that point. And that's why we're at this moment in time where we need to pass a continuing resolution. This is no way to run a government, but be honest with you, both political parties have been guilty of finding themselves in this mess before, where we've had to buy a little extra time into the fiscal year in order to agree on the budget for the remainder of that year. So what the president said to the Republican leaders of the House and Senate last week is, if you want to do this continuing resolution bill, just keep the government running until you can agree on all the appropriation bills. Give me a continuing resolution bill to December the 9th. And if you would, please acknowledge that we are facing a public health crisis with the Zika virus. The president raised that issue because in February of this year, 7 months ago, he notified the Congress that this was going to happen, that we were going to see these mosquitoes carrying the Zika virus, infecting people in Puerto Rico and in the United States, and endangering mothers who were carrying babies. So the president asked in February for Congress to give $1.9 billion to eradicate the mosquitoes, to lessen the danger, and equally important, to develop a vaccine which, frankly, when it's developed, all of us will want to take, that protects all of us from Zika virus infection in the future. What did the Republican-controlled Congress, do with the president's emergency public health crisis request for Zika? Nothing. They ignored it. Until May of this year, when in the Senate we finally passed, with 89 votes, Democrats and Republicans together, not $1.9 billion, but $1.1 billion, to deal with the Zika virus, this emergency public health crisis. It took 3 months. It should have taken 3 days. We sent the bill from the Senate with 89 votes over to the House of Representatives to deal with this crisis in May. What did they do with it? Instead of passing the bipartisan bill, which the president requested, they decided to load it up with politically controversial issues that they thought would help them in this election cycle. Listen to some of the things that they added to this bill, this emergency public health crisis bill. First, they put in the provision that there was a prohibition of funding any efforts by Planned Parenthood on family planning under this bill. Why? Because mothers facing the prospect of a pregnancy and the possibility of an infection would seek family planning help at Planned Parenthood. 2 million American mothers did last year. So they put this provision in to defund Planned Parenthood. They knew that that was going to be a fight. They put it in anyway. They eliminated $500 million from the Veterans Administration funding to process the claims of veterans, something we desperately need. They took the authority of the Environmental Protection Agency to monitor the chemicals that would be used to kill the mosquitoes, and then to add insult to injury, they put in a provision which said that you could display Confederate flags in U.S. military cemetery. Now, what does that have to do with the Zika virus? Nothing. It was a political gamesmanship. It was going nowhere. The president would never sign it under those circumstances, and they knew it. So now the president said, give me a clean Zika funding bill, and we will move forward with this continuing resolution. Finally, last week, the Senate Republican leader gave that clean bill as part of the CR. If that were all he did, we'd be finished. We'd be home. But he kept moving forward in other areas of controversy. You see, there was terrible flooding in Louisiana. A lot of innocent people were hurt, lost their homes and businesses. It has been a custom in the United States Congress to rally to the aid of victims of disasters. I've voted for it over and over again in maybe every state across the United States, because I knew the day would come, and it has, when Illinois would need a helping hand, and I wanted to be there for my colleagues. So we said this. We said to the leader on the Republican side, if you want to help Louisiana, and I do, also help the people living in Flint, Michigan. Remember when their water supply was contaminated? 100,000 people ingesting lead when there's zero tolerance in your bloodstream for that, and the damage is obvious? Imagine 9,000 children in Flint poisoned with lead-contaminated water. That happened. That poor city, they're still drinking water out of bottles every single day. And we said to the Republican leader, yes, we care about Louisiana. You should care about Flint, Michigan. If you're going to help Louisiana, help those poor people in Flint who are facing this kind of contamination. But he refused. He said there'll be money for Louisiana, but there won't be any money for Michigan. Why? We think there are victims in both places, and in the past, the Senate and Congress have risen to those tragedies and those demands. And I've done it on a bipartisan basis. It makes no difference to me that we have 2 Republican senators in Louisiana. It should make no difference to Senator McConnell that we have 2 Democratic senators in Michigan. Let's think about the Americans who are hurting in both places instead of playing political games. But no, Senator McConnell said, we will help Louisiana, we'll provide no help to Flint, Michigan. That is unfair, and it complicates the situation. If that were all that he did, it would be bad enough. But Senator McConnell has a pet project that he needs to put into this bill. Listen to what it is. It is a prohibition at the Securities and Exchange Commission that would promulgate a rule to require America's corporations to publicly disclose the campaign contributions that they're making. Under Citizens United, in warped thinking at the Supreme Court, they said corporations are persons when it comes to contributing money. Look what's happened. A flood of millions of dollars. Republicans were boasting they raised $43 million in their super PAC in August, and they got $20 million last week from Sheldon Adelson, a rich man who lives out in Nevada. Oh, they're rolling in millions, but Senator McConnell is determined to keep secret the source of these funds. And so he wants to put a prohibition for the Securities and Exchange Commission from requiring corporations to simply state publicly that they're making these contributions. We do. If corporations are persons, individual persons like myself have to make a disclosure of contributions that are made. Why should corporations have the benefit of being treated as a person to make contributions, but not the responsibility facing persons to disclose this publicly? Senator McConnell wants to keep that secret, and that's why he included it in this legislation and made it as controversial as it is. A simple word to the leader on the Republican side and to the wise who want to leave and go home and campaign: there's a way out of here. Treat the people in Flint, Michigan with the same respect we're treating the victims in Louisiana. Provide the resources for opioid funding, which we desperately need. Leave out this special interest provision protecting corporations that want to make political contributions but want to keep it secret so nobody knows what they are doing. And make sure that we finally, 7 months later, adequately fund the Zika crisis so that we can deal with this and develop a vaccine to protect all of America. Mr. President, I ask that my entire statement be made part of the record.